Well, everyone, it feels like it was just yesterday when Apple went ahead and released their M1 iPad Pros. And the thing with these iPad Pros was that they were a step in the right direction. I think these were really solid iPads that they made, and I really do think they were almost perfect. I don't think there was a lot to complain about here. Of course, they were kind of repurposing the design of the previous iPad, and in fact, some would argue that the current iPad still almost looks the same as a 2018 iPad Pro, to be honest, and I still kind of think about that, sometimes. But I will tell you, with the M1 iPad Pro, this was a signal that Apple was going to go ahead and start bringing that M chipset to more devices. And I do think that essentially with their marketing of that M1 chipset, it only made sense. And since then, they've brought that M1 chipset down to not only their iPad, other iPad Pros, but also to their iPad Air, which is honestly pretty interesting. So if you want to go ahead and buy an iPad that I would recommend like this one, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, the first thing you have to remember is that this iPad does come out in two different sizes. So it came out in a 12.9 inch display, which is the big one, but it also came out in that 11 inch display. So the thing you have to keep in mind here is that if you are getting the more expensive one, that is going to be significantly more costly. So in this case, in the one that I ended up buying during the time was actually the 11 inch model. And I will tell you, I've been using 11 inch iPads for a long period of time, and I enjoy using those cheaper iPads. Although they're not cheap, they are still cheaper than those big ones, and I actually do like that a lot. The displays on both of them are honestly fairly similar. Of course, the 12.9 inch one is going to be the better display, but even on the 11 inch one, you're still getting a very high resolution, you're still getting very good colors, and you're also getting 120 Hz display as well. So that is some really good stuff. And compared to the M2 iPad Pro, I really don't think you're behind too much on technology here. So I think you're still getting a very, very good type of device on something like, the iPad Pro, even the 11 inch one. Now on the bottom, we do have our USB-C port, which is awesome. It was also a Thunderbolt port, which we can go ahead and dock up a monitor if we want to, or some other technology like that. And that was a really cool thing that we had on this type of iPad too. And that kind of stuff really kind of does future-proof these types of iPads. So although it didn't have the most amount of features of all time, it was still a really nice upgrade coming from its predecessor, which was just a standard USB-C port. So here we had a little bit more flexibility, I would say. And on the back, we pretty much had that flat back, which there wasn't really anything else crazy going on with it. Pretty basic for the most part. It's been kind of the same design for a long time. And although I haven't really found myself complaining too much about the design of these iPads, I do think that Apple does kind of need to change something. I feel like we've gotten the same thing for a long period of time, and I am wondering when they're going to start switching things up. They switched up iPhones a little bit. They switched up MacBooks even. So, they switched up the iPhone Pros, the iPad, the MacBook Pros. I do wonder when they're going to start doing it to the newest iPad Pros, but I guess we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But I will definitely tell you, on the outside of this iPad, I still think it looks great. There's not a lot to complain about. I do kind of wish Apple would to take some more chances with the body, but I kind of see where they're coming from, and I think it's totally okay, no matter what. So, in terms of the outside, that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the camera setup, this iPad does have that, dual camera setup on the back. And I have always been, a pretty big advocate for iPad cameras. I don't think they're the best things to buy, but they're good enough. And if you need them in a pinch, I think they're decent, options. Now with this iPad Pro, you are getting kind of an interesting, setup. So you're getting a dual camera, you're getting a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, then a 10 megapixel ultra wide camera, and on the front, you're getting a 12 megapixel ultra wide camera as well. So starting off with the back, this camera is pretty much in line with something like an iPhone 11 camera, but it's not even as good as an iPhone 11 camera, if that makes any sense. This is a good camera. You can do 4K at 60 on the back, but I don't know why anybody would purposely go out and buy an iPad just like this, just for its camera. It really doesn't make too much sense to me from that perspective. I think with an iPad like this though, if you are in a pinch and you just need to go ahead and quickly use some sort of iPad, or you need to get a camera of some sort, I think this is not a bad choice. And I do think, it could overall be probably a worse experience at some point. So this is not that bad of an option in my opinion. But the front camera is honestly where things are a little bit more interesting. With the front of the specific iPad, you actually do have the capability of pretty much using this iPad as a, kind of a camera that follows you and tracks you. And that's always been a really cool feature that iPad cameras have that Apple ended up bringing not that long ago. So personally, I think that's something that stands out to me, and it's a really cool feature at the end of the day. So with the iPad Pro, it kind of gets a thumbs up for me from the camera side. It is missing a telephoto lens, and there's no 4K at 60 on the front, but I still think it's a pretty solid camera for sure. Now another thing, with its software, I am not too sure how long these iPads are going to last from the software standpoint, mostly because, we haven't really seen the M1 lifespan yet. None of the M1 iPads or none of the M1 MacBooks or any M1 device has been unsupported with software yet. So we really don't know what the lifespan is going to be. I'm hoping it is longer than what the previous iPads kind of lasted for. But when you look at something like the iPad Air 2 or the iPad Mini 4, those had some really long lifespans. So I hope Apple kind of does the same thing here with these M chipsets. But this thing just came out in 2021, so you are still probably getting another 3 years, maybe even 4 years out of this iPad for sure. So from that perspective, that kind of covers it up there as well. Now moving on to the performance side of things, this specific iPad does have some really good power inside of it. So for one, it does have that Apple M1 chipset inside, which as I mentioned before is a very, very powerful chipset. It also has 8 gigabytes of RAM on the bottom models, but it does go up to 16 gigabytes of RAM if you want to spec it out that high. Now I'm going to say that again. You are end up getting 16 gigabytes of RAM on an iPad of this caliber, which is insane. That is so much power to have. It's almost like unnecessary. I don't know why you'd want to buy an M1 iPad Pro when you can buy like an M1 MacBook Pro, probably not for not that much more expensive, and you could get 16 gigabytes of RAM and have like Mac OS, which is very powerful. So with this type of iPad, it is a very, very powerful machine. Even though we already have the M2 iPad Pros out, there's still pretty much no competition for the most part between Apple's landscape. It's only between the M2 iPad Pro and the M1 iPad Pro. Those are the most expensive ones. And I will tell you, if you are in the market, this thing is going to be a very powerful machine for many, many years. No matter what you do, no matter what you want to do, this thing is going to be able to handle everything you throw at it, from light games to heavy intensive games to video editing to anything you can name. You can definitely do it here for sure. So I'm not really too much of a power user, but no matter what I do, whenever I pick up pretty much any of my iPads, even my 2018 iPad Pro, it still feels like a very fast machine, and these M1 iPad Pros are pretty much no exception either. So from that kind of covers it up there. Battery life was the one thing I kind of heard mixed reviews on when this iPad first came out, and since then I haven't really heard too many complaints, but it did have a 7,538 mAh battery. Not a small size battery by any means, it's a good size battery for sure, and with that M chipset, I'm sure it honestly is super optimized as well. So that's kind of another plus point for the iPad Pro. And to kind of sum up this whole entire video, what I'd probably tell you is that the M1 iPad Pro, whether you get the 11-inch model or the 12.9-inch model, these are such good iPads to buy. They are very solid. They bring a lot of stuff to the table, and I just don't think it gets a crazy amount better from an iPad than this one. Like, of course, it could have like way bigger displays, less bezel, so many things like that, but I think for a lot of people out there, you would probably be okay with this type of iPad. I think this is very good. It just brings everything you need inside of an iPad like this, and I just think it's a pretty solid iPad for sure. If you want to buy a better one, you can get the M2 iPad Pros, but even then, these ones, I would just recommend buying them because they are that good, and they are very solid, iPads when they come down to it. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.